In March 1995, when Nelson Mandela received Queen Elizabeth II in Cape Town, the world watched the handshake. Cameras recorded the smiles, the ceremony, the careful choreography of two nations attempting to close a door on half a century of distance. The newspapers wrote about reconciliation. The broadcasters spoke of history. Nobody wrote about her necklace. Around the Queen's throat that evening, catching the light of a South African autumn, were 21 brilliant cut diamonds. The principal stone, resting at the hollow of her neck, weighed approximately 10 carats, simple by royal standards. No color, no rubies, no sapphires to draw the eye. Just white light, cut and arranged in a graduated line, largest at the center, smallest at the clasp. Before that evening, they had not been seen in public for 47 years. No document was ever signed. No official statement was ever issued. No spokesman for the palace ever confirmed the arrangement or its purpose. But in the grammar of royal diplomacy, which operates largely without words, the meaning was precise. For, as long as a particular government held power in South Africa, the Queen of the United Kingdom would not wear the gift that government's country had given her. She used the absence of a necklace as other heads of state used trade sanctions. This is the story of 21 diamonds, a leather box, and 47 years of silence that said more than any speech. To understand what that silence cost, you have to go back to a morning in April 1947, when she was not yet a queen, and the heaviest thing she carried was the knowledge of what was coming. The royal family had been touring South Africa since February. It was a long tour, built around the practical requirements of Commonwealth relations and the private requirements of a king whose health had begun to concern his doctors in ways they did not yet discuss openly. King George VI had aged considerably during the war. The strain of the Blitz, of the broadcasts, of the sustained performance of steadiness that the nation had needed from him, had left its mark in ways the photographs were beginning to show. Princess Elizabeth was 20 years old when they boarded HMS Vanguard at Portsmouth. She would turn 21 on the 21st of April in Cape Town. The morning of her birthday, Government House woke under cloud. Table Mountain, which dominates the sky above Cape Town, the way few natural features dominate any city on Earth, had disappeared entirely into grey. The plan had been to take the cable car to the summit. The weather made that impossible. She stood at a window of Government House and looked at the place where the mountain should have been. There are photographs from that morning. She is in uniform, preparing for the military inspection at Youngsfield that would come later in the day. She looks precisely her age, which is to say young, in a way that the photographs from 10 years later would not quite capture. Something in the set of her jaw, perhaps, something not yet fully fixed. The inspection at Youngsfield came first. Then, in the afternoon, the broadcast. She sat before a microphone in Government House and delivered the speech that would define how the world understood her for the remainder of her life. "I declare before you all," she said, "that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service." She was 21 years old. She meant every word. And the people listening understood, even then, that this was not the ordinary rhetorical pledge of a young royal. It was something closer to a legal instrument, a contract entered into publicly, before witnesses, with no exit clause. The diamonds arrived that same afternoon, a formal presentation, on behalf of the government and people of South Africa. 21 stones, one for each year of her life. The necklace had been constructed so that the stones graduated in size from the center outward, so that worn against the neck it formed something like a sentence, complete and balanced. The box was leather, rectangular, hinged. Inside, the blue velvet was the deep blue of a winter sky, just before full dark. Against that velvet, the 21 stones sat in their settings, and the light in the room found them and separated into the colors that white light contains, which is to say, all colors. She lifted the necklace from the velvet. What she said in that moment was not recorded. What entered the historical record was what she said afterwards, in the way that private words eventually find their way to paper. She called them her best diamonds. Not the most valuable, not the most ceremonially significant, not the most historic, her best. The distinction is worth holding. Most valuable is a ranking. Best is a relationship. She wore them to her pre-wedding gala later that same year. She wore them to Paris in May of 1948, to a reception at the Elysee Palace. In the photographs from that evening, the necklace sits against the neckline of a pale gown, the principal stone resting at the hollow of her throat. She is 22 years old. The French press photographed her at length. The diamonds catch the light of the reception room and distribute it in small, clean geometries across the fabric of her dress. She looks, in those photographs, like a woman who has not yet been asked to pay the full price of the promise she made before that microphone. In May of 1948, 3 weeks after Elizabeth returned from Paris, the National Party won the general election in South Africa. Daniel François Malan became Prime Minister. He had campaigned on a program his party called Apartheid, a word meaning separateness in Afrikaans, a word that would become one of the most recognized terms of the 20th century, attached to a system of racial classification and enforced segregation that would govern every dimension of life in South Africa for the next 4 decades. The response from Buckingham Palace was silence, which is to say the response was careful, considered, and entirely deliberate. This is a point worth stating with precision, because the simplified version of the story flattens something important. The Queen did not act alone. The Foreign Office had advisors whose entire function was to think through the diplomatic implications of exactly these situations: what a monarch wore, where she wore it, and what wearing it in a particular context would communicate to the governments watching. The calculation was institutional as much as personal. A gift from the South African government, worn publicly by the Queen of the United Kingdom, at a moment when that government was constructing legislation that classified human beings by the color of their skin, would constitute an endorsement that nobody in the palace or the Foreign Office was willing to make. The decision, then, emerged from the collaboration of institution and individual that defines constitutional monarchy at its most functional. The Foreign Office provided the architecture of the reasoning. But Elizabeth was not a passive instrument of that reasoning. She understood it, she accepted it. And given what she had said into that microphone in Cape Town in 1947 about a life devoted to service, it is reasonable to conclude that she would have arrived at the same place without being advised. The necklace went into its leather box. The box was placed in the jewellery room at Buckingham Palace, the room where the Queen's personal collection was stored and maintained. A room of considerable security that only a small number of people entered regularly. The blue velvet closed over the 21 stones. The light, for the diamonds, went out. Outside the box, the processes of history continued at their ordinary pace, which is to say with no awareness of and no consideration for what was sitting quietly in a room in a palace in London. The Suppression of Communism Act was passed in 1950. The Population Registration Act followed. The architecture of the apartheid state was constructed piece by piece over the following years, each piece a legislative confirmation that the original calculation had been correct. A man named Nelson Mandela, a lawyer and activist in the African National Congress, was arrested in 1962. He was tried in 1963 and 1964 and convicted of sabotage and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and taken to Robben Island, 11 kilometers off the coast of Cape Town, an island from which, on clear days, you can see the mountain. In the jewellery room at Buckingham Palace, the leather box held its contents undisturbed. The years have a way of making absence visible if you know where to look. In June of 1953, Elizabeth was crowned at Westminster Abbey. She wore the imperial state crown, which contains among its stones the 317-carat Cullinan II diamond, also from South Africa, presented to her grandfather in 1907 by the Transvaal government. A different era, a different politics, a stone whose origin carried none of the complications of the stones now sitting in the leather box. She wore the coronation necklace, the coronation earrings, the coronation bracelet. She wore everything the occasion required, and she did it with the composure that had by then become her most recognized quality. The South African diamonds stayed in their box. The Silver Jubilee was in 1977, 25 years of her reign, celebrated at St. Paul's Cathedral and in street parties across the country, in a year when the Sex Pistols released a record about the monarchy and the country, was simultaneously exhausted and, for one long weekend in June, unexpectedly cheerful. She wore the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, She wore the jewels that had accompanied her through a quarter-century of the work she had signed herself up for in Government House in April 1947. The South African diamonds stayed in their box. The Ruby Jubilee was in 1992, 40 years. She wore a brooch to the Thanksgiving service at St. George's Chapel that had belonged to Queen Victoria. The newspapers that year wrote more about the difficulties of the younger generation of the royal family than about the anniversary itself, and the Queen gave a speech in which she used the Latin phrase annus horribilis, describing a year of private unhappiness made permanently public. She did not mention the diamonds. There was no occasion to. They were not part of the public record of her reign in any way that required comment. And yet, in the jewellery room, the leather box held its shape. This is what 47 years of principle looks like from the inside. Not a single dramatic act of sacrifice, not a gesture performed before witnesses, but the repeated private act of opening a room and choosing, again, not to open a particular box. Year after year, occasion after occasion, the choice renewed without ceremony, without acknowledgement, without the comfort of anyone knowing it was being made. She had called them her best diamonds. The box sat in its room. In April 1994, South Africa held its first fully democratic election. Nelson Mandela, released from Robben Island in February of 1990 after 27 years of imprisonment, was elected president. He was 75 years old. The following year, Queen Elizabeth II flew to Cape Town for a state visit. She was 68. It was the first time a British monarch had been to South Africa since February 1947, since the morning the young princess had stood at a window in Government House and looked at a mountain hidden in cloud. Someone went to the jewellery room and took out the leather box. There is no account of what this felt like. There is no diary entry, no letter, no recorded conversation in which the Queen described the experience of opening that box after 47 years. The blue velvet, if it had been disturbed at all in the intervening decades, had been disturbed only for maintenance, for inventory, for the careful checking that the royal collection requires. It had not been opened for wearing. It had not been opened for that purpose since Paris, in May of 1948. What the photographs from Cape Town show is this. On the evening of her arrival, the Queen wore around her throat a necklace of 21 brilliant cut diamonds, graduated in size, the principal stone at the center. The stone rested at the hollow of her throat, exactly where it had rested in Paris 47 years earlier. Mandela received her with the particular warmth that had become his international character, open, direct, radiating the authority of a man who had been tested at a depth most people will never approach, and who had not become hard. He called her Elizabeth, without the title, in the way that only a very small number of people on earth were positioned to do. She received this with the composure that was her own signature, because she understood, as he understood, that there are forms of respect that exist beyond ceremony and do not require its equipment. Whether he knew the history of the diamonds is not recorded with certainty. The briefings that precede state visits are thorough, and the people who prepared them understood the symbolic weight of what she would be wearing. It is possible he had been told. It is possible he looked at the stones, recognized them as South African, and understood without being told. It is possible the meaning existed in the gesture itself, in her choosing them, and in his receiving that choice, and that the space between those two acts was where 47 years of accumulated silence finally came to rest. In 1947, she had stood at a window in Government House and looked at a mountain hidden in cloud. The cable car to the summit had been cancelled. She had stood before a microphone instead and pledged her life to a service whose full cost she was still learning. In March 1995, the mountain was visible. The photographs from that evening show the necklace catching the light of Cape Town, a harder, cleaner light than London or Paris, a light that comes from a sky with little moisture in it. The principal stone is a point of clarity at her throat. The last time those stones had caught South African light, she had been 21 years old. The necklace remains in the royal collection. It will not be sold. It will be worn, in time, by the women who come after her, on occasions whose meaning they will determine for themselves, occasions whose connection to 1947 or 1900 195 will fade as the distance grows, as it always does. The leather box may be kept, it may not be. Boxes are not catalogued with the same care as stones. They are considered vessels, not objects. But a vessel holds the shape of what it once contained. The blue velvet in that box holds the impression of 21 stones, each in its setting, graduated from the largest at the center to the smallest at the clasp. That impression does not disappear when the stones are removed. It remains in the velvet, the way a decision remains in the person who made it, present but not always visible, there but not always spoken of. She pledged her whole life to service in Government House in April 1947. She was 21 years old. She wore the diamonds in Paris the following year, and then she put them away, and the putting away was also service, also the working out of the pledge, also the price of the things she had promised. She called them her best diamonds. The box sat in its room for 47 years. Every time she opened that room, she knew it was there. What do you call that? Duty or grief?